Hi folks, it's good to be with you. Love to everybody out there. I'm just making a video on Hadith scholarship, and I've been reading Muslim scholars and studying them in depth. It's good to be with you folks. My website is jasonburnspreacher.com. You can get me on Twitter, you can get me on Facebook. Type in Jason Burns Preacher Twitter, you'll get good apologetic material, and if you turn to Facebook, you'll find good Bible teaching for people who want to be pastors and preachers. But I just want to talk about scholarship in Hadith. I've been studying Muslim scholars, and one thing I've noticed at Hyde Park with Hamza and other Muslim apologists, they'll attack the Gospels, the four Gospels. But when you compare the four Gospels to the historical material of the Quran and the life of Muhammad, like the historical material that tells us how the Quran was compiled and who Muhammad is, that comes principally from Bukhari and other hadith collectors. Now, Bukhari came 200 years after Muhammad. The first volume that we have is like 11th century, so that's like 630, so that's like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it's like 500 years after Muhammad. And then the first 9 volumes of Bukhari that we have in manuscript form comes like even later than that, so we're talking about 800 years after Muhammad. Now, the Muslims say that the hadiths, there are authentic hadiths, they have chain of narration. I've been checking their chains of narration, even on the more authentic so-called hadiths, and I've been finding that even in these chains of narration that they say is authentic, that there are people who are known liars, people who are not worthy to be said to be part of the chain of narration. So they're late sources, and the chain of narrations are fabrication. So that's why the German scholars in the 19th century, there's about 3 of them, I think Nordak and others, absolutely demolished hadith scholarship and showed that the hadiths are absolutely useless, worthless as historical information, really. So the best thing to do is really to go to the earliest sources that we can get, which is Ibn Ishaq. And if we do use hadiths, we've got to really have Western ways of looking at information, like the criteria of embarrassment or something. That's why if it does mention battles or if it does mention assassinations, it's probably more likely to be true, because why would you as a follower put information in that's going against your prophet? So the criterion of embarrassment is a good Western method to gain information, historical information. But the point is that when they start to attack the Bible, when they start to attack the Gospels, we're dealing with first century manuscripts based on eyewitnesses. When they start to do history from their own perspective, really what they're doing is they're just creating whatever they want to create. They're just creating an ideology, or creating a story out of all the rubbish material that they have. They're just creating something that suits them. So, for example, take the satanic verses, where Muhammad supposedly he told his followers to worship 3 gods, and then he was told that by so-called Allah that he made a mistake and he should repent of it and it'll be okay. The Muslims say, oh, that's not authentic. Right, okay. But do you know why they're saying that? It's because it doesn't suit their narrative. It proves that Muhammad's a false prophet. And that's why Adnan Rashid didn't want me to use Ibn Ishaq in the debate on is Christianity or Islam violent, because when I was quoting Ibn Ishaq about the assassinations that Muhammad had done and been involved in, it's also in that book. This is the earliest first century source of Muhammad. It's also in that book of the satanic verses, where he actually was shown to be a false prophet. So the top and bottom of this video is basically this: when Muslims are attacking the Gospels and the historical reliability of the Bible, there's no comparison between the Bible and Islamic information, Islamic scholarship. Islamic scholarship is basically mafioso scholarship. It's just mafia scholarship where they're just inventing their own story to suit themselves to blind the people. And that's all it is. The information that you have in Islam is basically a production of a particular tribe, the Quraysh family, which is like a mafioso family that had a guy who gained political power who said he was a prophet, and they doctored the information as years went on to suit their story that he was a prophet. There's very little historical evidence to confirm the Quran is inspired, but to show that the Quran is not inspired. And the historical information that they provide on Muhammad and the early history of the compilation of the Quran is all invented to suit their own story. But once you begin to dig into these hadiths and you begin to look at it, you surprisingly find information that actually overturns their ideology. For example, like the satanic verses, like the compilation of the Quran, where there's information in there where it says that verses of the Quran have been lost, etc. Once you dig into their sources and uncover stuff that actually undermines what they're saying, they say, oh, it's not authentic. But the reality is, most of it isn't authentic. But there are little gems in there. When you start to use Western criteria, Western methodology, you can unearth a few little nuggets, and those little nuggets begin to undermine the Islamic narrative. So this has been my studying of the Hadith recently, and studying Muslim scholars. I went into great depth onto a couple of Hadiths, one by Uthman on the compilation of the Quran, and one by Abu Bakr on the compilation of the Quran. Looked at the chain of narration, looked at the Muslim scholars, what they were saying. So I've gone into this in real deep depth. I mean, really deep. I mean, if a Muslim scholar was debating me, I can hold my own on the issue of how you confirm a confirmation of a hadith. Okay. And I went into it into great detail, and as I went into it, I was shocked at the absolutely terrible, shoddy lying and dishonesty amongst the Islamic world. The Islamic world is lying to you. The Islamic Dawah teams are lying to you. How can you do history that with sources that are 800 years after Muhammad? Bukhari, the first 9 volumes, it's like at least 500, but it's about 800 years before we have the 9 volumes of Bukhari. These are hadith collections of the life of Muhammad, 800 years after. How can you compare that to the Gospels that were written in the 1st century, and some of them by, all of them based on eyewitnesses of some degree? You can't compare the two. And on the compilation of the Quran, there's been a lot of devious stuff going on in the early history of Quran. A lot of political meandering and doctoring of the information, doctoring the manuscripts. The manuscripts have been doctored. They've been politically interfered with, the manuscripts. Where we have the Palmist manuscript of Sana manuscript, Palmist, where it's clear that there was political doctrine, political engineering of trying to change the text, because if you go ultraviolet light, you can see under that there was another text, and they've changed it and doctored it to suit their own doctrinal political views. Okay, and this is the kind of scholarship that I wanted to talk to the Muslims down at Hyde Park. Now, the Muslims keep coming out now, the Dawah teams keep saying, oh, Jason's a liar, Jason's this, Jason's that. And they said, oh, they've answered my questions, they've answered the other Christian evangelist groups. But the thing is we're all constantly doing more and more research, we're doing more and more scholarship. So they haven't answered us, they're not dealing with what we're saying, because I know Bob the Builder, I know DCCI, I know others. We're all doing original research, we're all going into this in depth. I'm going to teach myself Arabic next time I come down. We're all doing original research, and what we're finding is that the Muslim Dawah teams are lying to you. They won't engage with the scholarship that we're bringing down. God bless you.